Okay, so as I say, welcome along everybody this afternoon. Thank you for joining me nice and promptly. As I've already mentioned, this being a webinar, the chat function will not be live, I guess is the correct word. So feel free to use the Q&A as we go through, and I'll do my best to answer any questions. My name is Pretty, and I work with the YMCA Trinity Group. I am a senior trainer with the organisation. This webinar here is funded by the Be Well, Feel Well campaign, which is a partnership between Suffolk Mind, Suffolk County Council Public Health and Communities, and the YMCA Trinity Group. Various other community groups have teamed up with us throughout the year, depending on the theme of the month, as to who that was relevant to, all with ways to focus on your well-being throughout the year. So this month's theme is security, and this webinar will be focusing on the need for boundaries for our children and young people, and how it can actually help our young people to feel more secure within our parent or carer and child relationships. We will be sending out the slides across the coming sort of 10 days by email to everybody that's registered for this. So if you aren't able to join us for the entire hour, then never fear, you will still get all of the information sent out to you via email, as I say. So I've already introduced myself, but the YMCA Trinity Group itself, just for a little bit of background about them, they are a registered charity and they are holders of the Trusted Charity Mark. Therefore, training with the YMCA Trinity Group serves to provide support to young people in the wider community. Our passion is about helping young people to achieve their potential by empowering those who work with them in terms of their mental health understanding and learning. By attending our training or commissioning our mental health services, you and your organisation will be helping to support our projects and services throughout the community. As the Q&A function has already been mentioned, I will say it one more time and then stop talking about it. Feel free to pop any questions, queries, comments that you have as we go through into the Q&A. I am happy to have a look at all of them at the end of the session. And if I can't answer it within the hour, then we will make sure that one of us comes back to you, because of course you've all registered your email addresses. So we will be able to come back to you with any queries that we haven't been able to answer this afternoon. Now, all of our webinars aim to be non-judgmental, so please look out for yourselves this afternoon. Try not to berate yourselves. It's very easy to look inwards and look at all of the things that maybe we aren't doing to the absolute best of our ability. But at the moment, I can only hope that you're all doing the best that you can, given the skills that you currently have. So attending this webinar will hopefully help you to add to your toolkit of the ways that you are able to communicate with the young people in your lives. Much of what we talk about here will apply to both neurotypical and neuroatypical children and young people. And parents, you will know yourselves and the young people that we're thinking of this afternoon best. So please adapt these to your needs. Our objectives this afternoon will be to have a look at why children need boundaries, how we can say no to them. On the face of it, it seems as if, you know, saying no is maybe counterproductive. But actually, as I hope to show you this afternoon, that isn't always the case. We'll look at why, or rather which boundaries we can have in place and when we need to prioritize some over others. We will also look at tips and phrases that might help to implement various strategies and boundaries that we want to put in place, and ways that we can try and manage the negative emotions, both for ourselves as well as for the young people that we are going to keep in mind this afternoon. Now, sometimes I will give you examples that maybe aimed at sort of younger children. I will do my best to kind of cover both sets of age ranges, so somewhere in the middle, the teenagers as well as the much younger as well. But if I have covered very young children for one particular example, in the next one I will aim to look at excuse me, slightly older age groups, so that you don't feel that this is not relevant to you. For example, if you have young children, I've mentioned how to help older children and vice versa. So please do bear that in mind as we go through. And that might be one of the questions that you put into the Q&A of actually you mentioned this example, but how could I tailor that for a slightly older or younger child? Okay, so thinking about boundaries, what are they? These are lines, I guess, or parameters that define things, and we can use them to work out the sort of the edges or the limits of what we are willing to accept and what is going on in the unit that we're thinking about. Often boundaries can be tied into what we can or can't do, say, or places that we can be. It will often come from a need to be able to control and navigate the world around us and to stay safe. Boundaries will separate things, and they can be fluid, just like the tides of the sea, or quite static, so really non-negotiable, like walls of a castle, as you can see here. But like all things, boundaries will have a continuum. So if they are too harsh or static, they will cause injury and harm, and they can be seen as punitive or too harsh by others, by the young people that are in our care. But if equally, the opposite end of that spectrum, if they are unclear and they are too soft, then they are more likely to be ignored, and therefore of no use at all. Why do children and young people need boundaries? And boundaries will help us to navigate the world. I'd like you to think of someone that you have known that has perhaps made you feel safe. It could be now, it could be in a past kind of life that you were in, perhaps as a younger person, if some of us can remember that far back. But a person that made you feel safe, and someone that you knew could contain anything that you threw their way. So, but be that painful feelings, or if you were ill-behaved or acted out at certain points, you knew that that person and their kind of boundary was not going to shift, and that you were able to rely on them wholeheartedly. So with that person in mind, I'm hoping most of us have found an example. I'd like you to really focus on how that person being there for us made us feel. I'm hoping that it was secure, like we knew how far we could push that person, and that actually no matter what happened, they would still be there. No matter how we acted out, they would still be there. So this feeling of safety and this feeling of security is something that children today, children and young people today, will also be benefiting from. Boundaries will provide us with protection. So this can be a physical boundary, for example, a catch on a cupboard. So one of those that stop children opening the cupboard and then slamming it shut. So something that prevents a physical injury, or a lock on a garden gate, so that children will know that actually this is my space of where I can play, and I know that that cupboard shouldn't open. I'm sure there are those children and young people that would still like to try and get into that cupboard and will apply all kinds of methods to try and get into them. But at the end of the day, that is a statement that this isn't safe for you, and therefore we don't venture into it. A bit the same with older children, so tweens or teenagers, when we have got technology boundaries being put in place, social media, etc. You know, whether that be, okay, you're not on Snapchat until you're a particular age, or you don't play or own Grand Theft Auto until you are a particular age. Your internet settings are such on your laptop and your phone that they turn off at a particular time at night. All of these are boundaries that we as parents on a day-to-day basis will be putting in place for our young people. It usually impacts emotionally and psychologically as well as physically. So I mentioned the garden gate and the locks on the cupboards, but it will have an emotional and psychological impact in that children and young people will not understand it at the age of 2 and 3 when we prevent them from running out onto the road. But there is a sense of security that comes with that, which is, if I'm allowed to go into this space, it must be okay, because that has been deemed a safe place for me to be by those adults that are in control of these things, if you like. For example, if they know that the garden gate is always locked, then they know that they can play safely in whatever outside space is actually accessible to them. Boundaries are also things that we as adults too, but children and young people especially, want to and need to push against. They need limits to be able to push against them in order to learn how to start creating their own internal boundaries. Children will learn about what is a safe and secure boundary by pushing them, so that, as I said earlier, if they are too rigid, this can be counterproductive, because they are then limiting themselves when it comes to thinking about what their boundaries look like. And equally, if they are too lax, then as they grow older, their boundaries will be much more relaxed, possibly to their detriment as well. So it is quite important for us to think about what our boundaries are and why we're putting them in place. But usually when they push against boundaries, this isn't in order to annoy us. It's actually part of the natural phenomenon, which is learning what the point of a boundary is, how do we put them in place, how does it feel if they are relaxed or too harsh, and learning all of that. So quite often we will look at certain skill sets like tying shoelaces and learning their high frequency keywords. And these are just two examples that I can think of from my own children, where we see that as a responsibility as their parents and their carers, that actually, yeah, I need you to be able to, I don't know, tie up your football boots, or you know, get yourself ready for school, and actually can they dress themselves, this kind of thing. But the boundary side of things and setting them, we may or may not realize that actually teaching that to our children is part of our role as well. So guidance, as obviously goes hand in hand with boundaries, we set out guidelines for their behavior. By setting boundaries, you're actually helping your child to learn what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior. Setting clear limits on a consistent basis lets our children know that they can, what they can and what they can't do in different situations. So all of this boundary setting and guidelines is fairly important. Now, self-discipline comes into this as well. By learning what is okay and things that perhaps are not okay, children start to learn self-discipline and what they will eventually grow up and need to have as an integral part of themselves. You know, this getting up, getting ready for school, in the end is leading towards a productive member of society, somebody who's able to get up and make a contribution to the day. All comes within the sort of boundary setting and self-discipline. As children learn about other people's boundaries too, they in turn learn to respect their own personal boundaries. So as well as what goes on in the home, we are thinking about when, for example, they start nursery or they have started different extracurricular clubs, what is allowed and what is not allowed, and what feels safe for us and what feels safe for other people, all comes into that. So They can see that maybe, I don't know, mummy doesn't like to be climbed up upon whilst she is dealing with something else, for example, answering the telephone. And then that becomes a little bit of an understanding of, okay, there are times when I can, when this makes sense and this is comfortable for me and mum. And at other times I need to look at what the situation is and read into that. A bit similar to having personal space then when they are in the outside world, and maybe a particular child that they are in school with doesn't want them to lean over them to grab a paintbrush or some such like, and their understanding around all of this grows all in line with our boundaried approach. So how we identify our boundaries, much of this is going to depend on the age and the stage of development of each child, but also the needs of the family as well. So clear and firm guidelines will help our children to learn what the limits are for them personally, for us as a family, and of course in the wider world as well. How we relate to our children affects how their brains develop, and therefore what kind of people that they will eventually grow into. Now, I want to make this point here that this is not, again, about berating ourselves or putting ourselves down for things that we may or may not have done as parents. We have a set of skills and we are working with them on a daily basis. And we come along to training such as this and we learn a little bit more and we change a particular thing that we are doing with our young people. And that, as a human being, is all that we can expect at any one time. So please remember that we're not thinking about being absolutely perfect parents. Relationships can always be repaired and we can make changes, and we are always learning and growing together. But having said that, having an understanding of neuroscientific concepts can change the way that we understand and relate to the children and young people that we work with or live with. That seems to... Okay, I just wondered if my slides had moved around a bit, but we'll continue and see whether my neuroscience bit comes back in. So let's think about what boundaries we are trying to set. As I've said before, this will depend on the age of the child that we're thinking about. For example, if it is a baby or a toddler, the boundaries usually are about keeping them physically safe because they don't yet know what will and will not hurt them. As they grow, your toddler will start to learn the words no and mine. And it's important that we respect this within reason. Remember, we've talked about how when they go into the outside world, certain things will start to become clearer about things like saying what's mine, particularly, I'm thinking in a nursery setting, can be troublesome because if the same toy, which doesn't belong to the child, I hasten to add, is always mine, then that means that they are not also learning about other people's boundaries and sharing. So with that in mind, however, if they are saying that something is theirs and no, they don't like this, rather than completely shutting them down, we have to build some understanding around that and what is the message they're actually trying to tell us. They're at this point putting their own boundaries in place. And we must aim to try and listen and understand which boundaries they are setting and whether it is healthy for us to maintain that boundary for them and with them. This helps to keep them safe, both as toddlers and when they get older. So thinking about your child's developmental age as well as their chronological age and asking yourself, is my child capable of doing what I'm asking them to do? Is it a realistic expectation or am I demanding too much and equally too little of them? If I take you back to the example about getting dressed, you know, there are particular milestones in place for all development of children. You know, when do they first start to sit up? When do they start to crawl? And a similar thing, when are they able to dress themselves and so on and so forth. But if you have more than one child in your mind's eye at this moment in time, you will probably see that both or all four or all five of the children did not meet all those milestones at the same time. So we've got to take into account each child's individual ability as well. When we are setting boundaries in place, we need to think about our wording. How do we present the boundaries to our children? Because this can play a key role. Let's think about two examples. One, finish your homework by 2 o'clock or you can't play on the iPad. Or feel free to play on your iPad as soon as you finish your homework, if it's before 2 p.m. So the second boundary is positive and it encourages the young person to do something after they have completed their homework. The first is more negative and more of a threat, if you like. That will be taken away from you unless this has happened. In the second one, you are almost encouraging the child to have been done before 2 o'clock, almost with the kind of understanding, I fully believe that this will be done before 2 o'clock, because I believe that you can get that done. So I will repeat those two to you again, just for you to maybe start getting some idea of a boundary that you may recently, it being half term and that at the moment, have set, and how you could tweak that the next time that this comes around. So the first one was, you can't play on your iPad, sorry, finish your homework by 2, or you can't play on your iPad. So what happens if I finish at 2:05? What happens if I finish at 2:10, Mum? Do I not get the iPad? But the second one was, feel free to play on your iPad as soon as you finish your homework, if it's before 2 p.m. So if it's afterwards, we're going to have another negotiation about this. We're going to have another chat. That is all that you're saying at that point. So the encouraging nature of the second statement, plus the positive kind of outcome of getting that homework completed by 2 o'clock. So thinking about which boundaries, it might be that they want to have lots of outside activities, and that leaves the family quite exhausted, or the one carer, the one person who may be doing most of these activities, it leaves them more exhausted than they would like. So we need to consider, how do they get lots of time to expend energy, but actually we are also not leaving either the entire family or one person more exhausted than they need to be. Are there other ways that we can get them to burn off some of that energy before we go outside? So have they got opportunity in the house to help us with the housework, for example, or something that they may not even realize is a chore or is homework, but actually the dog, I'm hoping we're not talking puppy here, we're talking a dog who needs a belly rub or just needs to play catch. Can we use other means to try and get some of that energy used up? And social time is really important for children and young people. Are our children spending more time socializing, so that they're actually using up, again, a mental energy rather than just the physical energy? So there are different energies that we can get them to use up. I really don't want to liken children to dogs. However, for this particular example, I think it's quite important to think about. We recently acquired a dog, and my understanding is that I could walk him for hours and hours, and that he wouldn't get as tired out as when I set him a kind of sniff it and find activity within the house. So using up their brain power rather than just their physical energy may actually tire them out more as well. Things around the house that don't feel like homework or learning, but that we can get them to do. So, if baking a cake, looking at all of the scales and the measurements and things like that. And the sooner we start activities such as this with our young people, the more of an enjoyable activity they see it as, rather than, why are you getting me to do the cooking? Which is what my 14-year-old would say now to me, because I missed that boat. But you may have young people that are actually more amenable to getting things done around the house, restacking the pantry, for example, and looking at labels while we're doing that for slightly older children. I appreciate your toddler is not going to be happy with that one, or getting them involved in some kind of physical activity that we're doing within the house. Again, I've seen dogs on YouTube that are doing yoga with their owners. So is that something that we can get young people to be involved in as well? Another thing that can often be an issue for our household, certainly over half term, is snacking. So literally the food bill will double at least over half term, and that's because they're here, they're having their lunch. I appreciate that, rather than at school, but the constant snacking throughout the day as well. Now, I don't for a second believe it's because they're hungry. I do think that they are bored, probably dehydrated, and therefore it gives them something to do and something to occupy them. So snacking, if we can ensure that that is of a particular quality and is cut off at a particular time before the next meal, because mine inevitably will get to lunchtime and go, I'm not hungry, because they've grazed between breakfast and lunchtime. And then they eat their lunch at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which then inevitably means they're not ready for dinner. So putting things in place that can mean that we as a family, actually, that's just not what we're doing, is grazing throughout the day. Maybe by 10:30, 11, there are no more snacks available because you've kind of had your window, if you like, around that. Now, schoolwork, it's a universal thing where this will be a bone of contention quite often in households. And if it isn't in yours, then please disregard everything I'm about to say. And how did you set those positive boundaries? I'm jealous. But setting positive boundaries around homework, because it is a necessity. Quite often, as we get older, it becomes more of a necessity rather than the projects that we do, let's say in year 4 about the Romans. By the time we're looking at sort of 15-year-olds, we're thinking about coursework, which actually does have a knock-on impact. So if we have set ourselves some positive boundaries around all of that much earlier on, then that can help us in the long run later on. So I don't know, get your homework done, and then we can do this. So rather than you won't get Xbox or you won't be able to go to Joshua's party unless you do this, let's have a positive outcome for as soon as their work is complete. And depending on the age of your child, chronological and developmental, you may need to keep that positive outcome quite small and quite now. Joshua's party might be 3 weeks away, for example, and they don't care one hoot about it right now, because children are not hardwired yet to be thinking about even a day's time, never mind 3 weeks' time. So we've got to try and keep the positive reward for getting that thing done to the kind of here and now, if we can, and definitely the today. And also be aware that sitting down for 45 minutes to an hour of homework is nigh on impossible for young people, because their attention span will not do it. So, as I said before, is what we are asking our child or young person to do within their capacity. If sitting down for an hour is not possible for them, then we're fighting a losing battle. We're setting them up to fail. So keep it to smaller periods of time, keep it bite-sized. If you know they have a project to complete over half term, maybe we do 20 minutes a day rather than that horrible Sunday night feeling. And I've been there. I have 100% been there myself. So at no point am I saying that we should all be absolute experts at this, but knowing that it could be a pitfall at the end of the week and trying to put some things in place prior can help us, as well as the young people that we're thinking of today. So teenagers, when we get to the teenage years, we want to find a balance between bonding with our children and boundaries. If all we ever speak to our young children, young teenagers rather, about at that point is boundaries, it is likely that they won't want to talk to us when they have something else on their mind, because all that we want from them is this, and it needs to be done then, and this is how to do it. they may start to feel that the only time to talk to them is, the only time we talk to them is when we ask them if they've done something, or if they have completed a chore, or what did you get on that assignment. And this focus on just getting things done can often hurt our relationship with the young people. So thinking about how can we connect with our teenager outside of what have you done, and when can you get it done, and why haven't you, and what on earth were you thinking, all words that have left my mouth. I have a 14 and an 18-year-old, so very teenage heavy in this household. But can we talk to them over dinner, maybe once a week, if it isn't something we can do on a daily basis? That was one of the positives of lockdown for us. We all sat down and had pretty much every meal bar breakfast together, and there was a lot more dialogue going on between all of us. That's reverted back to the children eat at one time, and then I might grab something on my way out, and my husband has food at a different time. But if we can, we try and make one meal a week where we would all sit down, and it isn't about how many jobs has my 18-year-old applied for, and what GCSE options is the 14-year-old going to go for, and so on. And it literally is about anything and everything. It has taken time, and the children haven't always enjoyed it or been open to sitting and having those discussions, but it is getting better. It might be an evening stroll, depending on your child or children's kind of interests and whether they want to go out and about. Maybe around bedtime story time, thinking about other things rather than just reading a story and then wishing they would go to sleep so we can get on with a bit of downtime for us or the next lot of laundry, which I know is tempting. But can we ask them about a particular character in the book? What do they think they might do next? Or why do they think they said that in that manner? Or did they enjoy their day at nursery? And rather than making it just about that one activity, can we expand that somehow? Driving lessons with an 18-year-old. They're not really very keen to talk about other things at any other time, but he's a, what's the word? He's kind of a, it's not going to come to me right now. Captive audience is coming to me at that point. And it's amazing how much better he drives when he's actually talking to me about stuff, which I thought would have the opposite effect. But a closer bond with our young people as they get older will pave the way for applying these boundaries and for them to be adhered to. Boundaries will help our teenagers to mature into adults, and then in turn one day help them to parent too, because that may be the route that they choose one day. So we need to know our boundaries so that we can model them to young people. And if they forget their boundaries, we are able to stand beside them and guide them back onto track. And with teenagers, health warning, there's always a question you can ask yourselves, and that is it worth the battle? Because sometimes it just isn't. If it isn't going to necessarily impact them, I don't know, in a year's time, we may want to leave that battle for another day, or it may be something that just is not worth us diminishing our relationship over at all. So how do we implement boundaries and everything that we have been talking about? Well, we need to be clear and we need to be consistent so that we are not changing boundaries, we are not changing the goalposts, because that does the complete opposite, which is of what we want, which is for children and young people to feel secure. If we are constantly moving the boundaries, they don't know where they stand. If we say bedtime is at 8 o'clock and then they, I don't know, shout and scream, or one more game on the Xbox, just one more, and we relent and we make that 8:30, how far can they keep pushing that, and when do they feel that they can stop that? If we know that 8 o'clock, and I am thinking of a particular age group here, guys, not our teenagers at this point, so sort of our 7-8-year-olds getting into the bedtime routine, at 8 or whatever time your family chooses. That wasn't me going, that has to be the time. Whatever time we choose, we've made that decision for a reason, and we need to stick to it. On the odd occasion, I don't know, they've gone to Joshua's party and the party finished at 8 and it's going to be late, or it's half term and you know that there's a particular movie that isn't going to finish till 8:45. We of course have those odd times, but we do need to be clear and consistent as much as possible. So if we can get that to sort of 80% of the time, then I think we're onto a winner. Giving advance notice of things, you know, sort of we're leaving in 5 minutes, may be enough for your child, but they may need a half an hour countdown, and just saying 30 minutes may not mean anything to them because they don't necessarily have the same kind of understanding of time as we do. Even when they can tell the time, it isn't always the same. So depending on the kind of understanding your child or children, young people have, then we need to make sure that we're giving them advance notice. You know, if you choose to take another game now, PlayStation, Xbox, it is going to take you over the bedtime. So if you have stopped now and it's 10 to 8, it's probably a good time to just chat to your mates or just listen to some music. Don't start a new game, and help them to understand that as they get older. The next one is quite difficult, keeping emotion to one side. I've already said I'm a parent myself, and it isn't always as easy as just moving it out. But if we think about what is it that I need or I want my child to achieve out of this, and if I bring how upset I am or angry I am into this situation, does that get me the end result? Does that get the end result for this young person? If the answer is no, then we probably need to put that anger and that hurt and that disappointment sometimes aside until we can deal with that in an hour's time when they have gone to bed, done the chores, whatever it might be. Sometimes we do need to say no, and we are going to move on to explore that concept of how that looks. Sometimes we can't just give them the prior warning, stick with our boundaries. Sometimes the answer has to be hard and fast no. But before we think of that, just a little bit more on keeping our emotions in check. So checking in with ourselves is almost as crucial as looking out for the young people that we're thinking of this afternoon. So stop and think about where we are, how we're feeling, where we're feeling it. Are we hurt? As I said, are we angry? Am I embarrassed? In a busy shopping center, that can be the overwhelming emotion at that time. Once you've stopped, once you've started to take some notice of what's going on for you, taking some deep breaths, taking a deep breath in, and then as you breathe out, lengthen that breath. So the out breath is longer than our in breath. And that will start to calm our automatic response system, which will be either fight or flight or freeze. But more often than not, when we're dealing with young people, that will present itself as anger. Sometimes it is tears, but more often than not, whatever we are feeling, it is then masked by us being angry and shouty and stompy, which is, again, don't forget, we've talked about role modeling to young people, not really how we want them to seek to deal with emotions as they get older. We'd like them to understand what's going on in their bodies and to deal with it appropriately. And anger isn't always necessarily the only response that we can model to them. So once you've checked in with yourself, worked out where you're at and what's going on for you, we need to communicate what's going on in terms of the situation, not your emotions necessarily, to our young people. So acknowledge what's going on for them quite possibly as well. So I can really see that you are struggling with what I've asked you to do right now. However, if we don't get it done right now, then we may miss out on the competition deadline, or I can really see that you are enjoying jumping on the sofa and me asking you to stop has angered you or disappointed you. However, what I need you to do now is this, because jumping on the sofa will break the springs, or jumping on the sofa is dangerous and you may fall off. And so you give them an actual understanding of what it is that you've asked them to do and why. So it's not just a get down from the sofa. Well, if somebody asked us to do that as an adult, we'd be a little bit confused as well. So we need to think about the reason behind it and whether we're able to share that with our children. Isn't always possible, and I wouldn't recommend that we do it in all circumstances. But as the adults in the situation, we can make that judgment call, if you like. And we can then always redirect our child. So as I said, how about we go and jump on the trampoline instead? Or if that isn't possible because of the weather, how about you help me to empty the dishwasher, and then we can see what the weather's doing and go and jump on the trampoline. Or maybe we make a a dive platform from the sofa onto the floor using these cushions, and bring them into an alternative option that they could do instead. So saying no and how we go about it. An outright no is with no invites of an alternative or a redirection. This will get our children's defenses fired up immediately. So they are more likely to engage a part of their brain that is reactive, that is argumentative, that is stubborn. So how about we, if we're possible, if in that situation we say yes, but we attach a condition to it. So yes, you can have the sweets that we bought from the supermarket earlier, but only when you have finished all your tea. So finish all your tea and then you can have the sweets. Or a soft no rather than a firm one. Not a soft no, a no, but one that isn't absolutely final, if you like. So without getting into an argument with our children and young people, they are little, usually smaller than us in size, not when they're 14 and 18. So I am thinking younger than that. But the smaller that they are, the more awful a big no from up here sounds. So maybe getting down to their level, looking at them in their eye, giving them that respect, and then telling them no because, and explaining, as I said a little while ago, why it has to be a no, because it isn't always possible to say yes and then attach a condition to it. And we are going to have to be the bad guys every once in a while. When we do say no, not just getting down at their eye level, but using a voice that sounds non-threatening. So it's a no either way, whether we say no at the tops of our voice, I've told you a million times, or whether we get down and say it's a no for now, or that is a no. Your body language needs to match what your voice is saying, and all of it needs to feel very non-threatening. Now, if we've done the stop and the reflecting on how we're feeling and the breathing, we are going to be able to do that in a much, much more straightforward way than when we are losing our temper because we are embarrassed, disappointed, upset, and all of the other emotions that I've mentioned. So we're not saying no with a big smile on our face, but we are saying no without our face being all scowled up and letting them know that something has gone very wrong, because that can feel really disconcerting. So trying to stay calm and relaxed on the inside will help us to say the no in the way that it will be better for our children to hear. So as I've said, being calm in our delivery of the no or the yes with a condition. Be clear about the limit that we are setting and whether that is a definite no or whether that is a no for today. For example, the jumping on the sofa is probably going to be a no full stop, but the jumping on the trampoline for now, because it's raining, it is a for now. As soon as that weather changes, we will be able to move that activity outside. Being firm and holding on to that consistency, as I said, not then because your child has, I don't know, then sat in the corner and cried, or really can continue to be demanding, we then give in, because that only teaches them that boundary is flaky and it is really easy to shift. And remember, I said earlier that that just enhances their feeling of insecurity. So as long as we are sure and secure in our boundary setting in the first place, we should have no qualms about keeping it there and firm. Acknowledging our child's feelings, as I've said before, you know, I can see that this has really upset you. You were looking forward to doing that, however, and giving them the respect of actually giving them a reason might make it easier to swallow. The number of times I've sat on a tube and thought, why aren't we moving? As soon as I have a reason for it, whatever that might be, a signal failure or whatever, or a train on the line further ahead at the station, I am more than happy to sit and wait for that 5 or whatever minutes it is. However, if I don't know, the frustration is to boiling point. So I think we need to understand our children as small people, and give them the same respect that we would expect as well. Stating the behavior that we want to see, again, that's kind of the straightforward thing of why you can't do this and what I would like to see instead. And we won't be able to give them that alternative state of behavior if we are not fully regulated in our own emotions, because we haven't taken the time to stop and breathe and think. I've mentioned a little bit of this already to you in terms of the way that we say no. So the behavior looking aggressive and feeling unkind and something that is really unsafe for our children. So I won't read through it all for you, but you can see the difference between the assertive behavior and the aggressive behavior, versus also the passive, which is where, again, that uncertainty around, well, can I shift this boundary and would it hold fast when I really need it to? I don't know. Not conscious thoughts the children are having, but in their subconscious mind, if our boundaries aren't firm and fair, they could be shifted at any point, and then does that leave us in some danger? So if we just look at, for example, the face and the eyes row, when we are being assertive, we are making comfortable, direct eye contact. But when we are being aggressive, and this is not intentionally aggressive at all, this is because we don't feel regulated and we feel out of control, but we still need the child or the children to do what we have asked. And therefore, our look at our child or children is unbroken, it's intense. We could have a clenched jaw and talk to them in this way, as opposed to a fair, firm and a kind way of talking to them. Smiling where appropriate, but not to the extent where you can see in the passive it's exaggerated smiling of, yeah, there, don't worry, I'm not trying to upset you, because you're not trying to do that when you're being assertive either, but you are confident in your decision of why they can't do a particular thing, and therefore, you know, you don't need to have a face that feels all tight and yeah, not relaxed. So as I said, these slides will be with you and you can spend a little bit longer on this one and having a look at it. And that middle column, I really can't reiterate this enough. This is not us thinking, right, they've been an absolute, I'm going to be really aggressive towards them. We are not thinking that for a moment. But because internally we have this conflict going on, that will obviously show in our body language. Even for the best of actors amongst us, it will come out in a way that our children can pick up on. So managing our responses, we would like you to think about, actually, these ideas are taken from a book by a chap called Dan Siegel. and his co-writer on this, Tina Payne Bryson, and they talk about reflections on how we have disciplined our children and thinking about how can we improve that. Every single interaction we have with our children, every single time, how do we improve upon it? Not about looking back and berating ourselves about what we didn't do, but looking forward and thinking about, okay, what will I change next time? So just some of the reflections that they ask us to think about in their book is, how patient can I be? And this will be a struggle for some of us more than others, because some of us are generally not as patient as other people. Even in our day-to-day business, we might be more impatient than others. So we almost have a bigger challenge or hurdle to overcome. How willing are you to express love to your children even as you discipline them? And that can sometimes get lost in our language. We know that we are putting these boundaries in place to keep our children safe, to teach them how to be responsible adults. They do not see it that way. They see it as limiting their lives. They see it as they're the only ones in their friendship group that can't have their phone beyond 9 o'clock or whatever. They're the only one that doesn't have Snapchat. We've all heard some of these comebacks, you know, but can we acknowledge that that must be really hard, actually, if the vast majority of your friendship group do have Snapchat? However, for us and for our family, that is not right at this moment in time. If that's the thing that we're having the discussion about, it could be any number of other examples. And can you let go of your desire to be a perfect parent, to get everything right every single time, to be the one that has the child that hits every single milestone at every chronological age, because that is what your antenatal group you know, thrive on, or whatever. And even as a parent to an older child, you know, is the A levels and university route, for example, the one that everybody in your friendship circle aspires to? And is your child not that person? Are you able to let go of that and stand by them and let them know that you support them regardless? Or are you constantly hampering on about A levels, university, and any one of any number of other examples that I've talked about today? Okay. Now, I wish I'd been able to change this slide earlier, actually, and put them more in, I don't know what's more of a whiny color. I want it, I want it now, I want it now, I want it, I want it. We're all human, so let us not forget this. And there are going to be times when we get it wrong, or our reactions are out of proportion to the situation itself. It is all too common in parenting because we're not robots. Children are great at letting us know what our triggers are, because they more often than not will push them. So what do we do when we have said no in a shop, for example, and our child will continue to ask for that toy so badly? A gentle and firm no, but our child stamps their feet and shouts, I want it. And people start looking at us. And we say, no, I'm not buying you that toy today. And they say, I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it. And you start to feel your anger rising. And there's the urge to get angry with our child, or to threaten them, no sweets, or, you know, I'll be taking your PlayStation away from you, or we march our child out of the shop. What could we do instead? Now, at this point, we go back to that slide a couple of slides ago. We stop, we notice, and we breathe. We may then march our child out of the shop, but we will be doing it in a firm and fair way, rather than in a hostile, angry way. And then we will probably want to come back and talk to our child again, age dependent, to talk to them about what went wrong that day and how we could have managed, we, them and us, could have managed that in a different way. What would they have liked to have seen from us, other than to buy the sweets or the toy? What else would have helped them in that situation? And be honest, if they're of an age where they'd understand, of what would have helped you as well. Okay, so co-regulation and what it is. This is a great little video, which I am unfortunately going to run out of time to share with you today. But I will talk to you a little bit about what co-regulation itself is. And I've been mentioning it time and time again throughout the session this afternoon in terms of being able to react appropriately to the situation. So if our child is in a dysregulated place because their brain has not fully developed and they are usually thinking with the I want it and I want it now, and they are not rational human beings at this moment in time, and they are very reactive. If we meet their reactive nature at that instance with our own reactiveness, then we are basically heading for implosion. So what is important, and what the stop, notice and breathe technique will hopefully do for you, is to allow you to regulate your own emotions and bring them right back down. If we then talk to our child in an even tone with a kind of regulated, breathing is even, we're getting down to their level if they're small enough for that, and meeting them eye to eye, their breathing will start to mirror ours, and they will start to get oxygen going around their bodies and into their brains. And they will hopefully bring themselves back down into a regulated place a lot quicker than if we met them with aggression. So I will leave that video, and my apologies that I have talked for so long that I have not left us enough time to watch, but well worth watching that video when you do get the slides, please. No, don't want to do that. So another question to ask ourselves is, do we enrage our child or do we try and engage them? So some of the things that I, as a parent, have said, which is really quite hurtful for our child when they are in a place where they're not regulating themselves, where they are feeling hard done by, are things like, it's not that big of a deal. You need to stop shouting at me. That's rude. Stop crying right now. And other examples on there that you can see. When we are at a place where they are doing the crying or the stamping of their feet, they simply cannot hear us. They have got to a boiling point and everything in their brain has shut down and they are not hearing us. So at that point, our breathing, what we are modeling to them, and our words will be the ones that make all the difference at that point. And if we can, again, if they're small enough and it's not going to end up with us getting a fist to the face, and we can hug them and keep our breathing even, it will bring theirs back down as well. If they are slightly older, it might be that we need to leave them be for a little while and then come back to them, rather than trying to talk to them at that time when they are completely deaf to us because they are absolutely raging in their heads and they can't hear you. You wind yourselves up and you're winding them up more. It might be that as a tween or a teenager, that's the time where we leave them to it, if it's safe to do so. I appreciate that might not be the young person you've got in mind. But sometimes walking away from the situation, then coming back to it might be the answer. So whenever you're in a situation with a young person, think about, is what I'm about to say or do going to enrage them further? Because if it is, then I need to step away. To engage our children, we need to think about approaching them in a non-threatening way. Now that goes back to the table that we looked at a little while ago with the red in the middle, and thinking about making sure that we are in a place where we are able safely to talk to our children, connecting with them. We've mentioned meals, walks, activities that aren't chore-based, and being authentic. If you have been hurt, if you are feeling disappointed, maybe not at that moment, but when we come back to reflect on this, be honest with our children about how that did make us feel and what behavior it was that, you know, really disappointed us or really upset us. Acknowledging their feelings is just as important as well. Keeping whatever we're asking them to do, or however we want to reflect on it and change it the next time it happens, we need to keep it simple. making sure that we're empathic at all times, and being flexible within reason. I know that depending on the example that we're talking about, it might not be as straightforward as just being as flexible as throwing ourselves off the sofa onto a plethora of cushions. Some instances do need us to be more rigid. So here are some phrases that might help us to connect with our child. I won't read them out to you, but certainly the last one, you know, really acknowledging and understanding what is going on for your child at that time. But all of them are from a viewpoint of actually what's happening for them, rather than this is really embarrassing for me, that has really upset me. Of course, your feelings need to be taken into consideration, but are we acknowledging theirs as well? If that is the only thing we change out of today's session, is just pointing out to the young person that we can see and understand that something is difficult for them, then we will have made masses of progress. So we've mentioned some of these already, ways that we can connect with our child or children without any words leaving our mouths is getting down to their eye level, you know, getting below their eye level if they're kind of looking down as well, so they can actually see what your face is telling them, bearing in mind what our face is communicating, and our body posture. Are we leaning over them? Have we got our arms folded? I'm not sure you can see me in the screen, but you know, what is our body conveying? We might be saying, look, okay, I understand that you're having a hard time. Does it look that way though? It actually looks like I still want my way. So we need to be mindful of that. If everything goes to pot and isn't working, then these are some things that we would invite you to think about, giving young people choices, giving them autonomy, giving them some choice over their own decisions. So you can jump on the trampoline in the garden, or we can take the cushions off the sofa and you can jump on them, but you're not jumping on the sofa. Yeah. Describing the problem. I can see that you love jumping, and the problem with jumping on the sofa is that it will break the base. So as I said, give them the respect that they may come to understand that actually there's a reason that you've given them that. Inviting some mastery on part of the children. So, wow, look at you jumping. I wonder if you'd be able to jump higher on the trampoline. And it might be when it stops raining, but nonetheless, you've set them like a challenge that they can prove something to you, and get them to show you when they feel that they are jumping higher than they were indoors. And connecting with them again, playful things. How about we go outside and see who can jump higher on the trampoline, you know? Different phraseology. Come on, my little jumping bean, and just acknowledging that what they were doing was really intriguing and interesting to them. So I can see a sofa that doesn't like being jumped on. These are the I statements. How can we make the sofa feel better? So again, that is for much younger children. I appreciate that, but we will get to a point where we're actually thinking, or the young people are thinking outside of themselves, and it isn't all about them. So it becomes a lot less inward reaching and starts to look outwards, and then they may one day be getting to a point where they can think about our feelings as well. Okay, so thinking about reducing any negative emotions with the no and with the everything else that you've had to put in place, is connection is the biggest thing. Understanding things from their perspective. If you think back to the person that I asked you to think about at the beginning of this session, somebody who made you feel safe and you knew would be there for you no matter what, I bet you can think about the connection that you had to that person. So if our child or young persons feel that they are understood and that we get them, they're more likely to cooperate. And that isn't always possible, because we may be at a point, they're 14, 15, and maybe you know, we haven't always been that parent, but we can start to build that bridge at any point. We are never too late. So I would urge you to try and think of ways to connect with them. Try and make it true to yourself so it doesn't feel false. But remember that they are carrying around a lot of emotional luggage, as are we. But think about how they can release some of that through playing, dancing, singing, just connecting with you. Actually, if they're that much older, 14 and 15 and so on, they are carrying a lot around. So connecting with a loved one like yourselves may be the difference that they need. Okay, I do apologize. I've missed a video out and I've gone a little bit over, but thank you for those of you that have been able to stay with me. So just to recap, we've had a think today about why young people and children need boundaries, how we can say no to them, which boundaries we might want to put in place and when, thinking especially about which battles do we want to venture into, and tips and phrases that we can start to use. Remember those I statements and thinking more from their point of view. Our feelings will come into this, but we need to grow children that are able to take that on board first. So regulating ourselves at the moment may be just down to us. And ways to reduce and manage some negative emotions. I think at the end of the day, my one resounding message would be treat them as smaller human beings and give them that respect. And over time, it's not an overnight fix, guys, but over time, they will start to reap the rewards of that, as hopefully will your relationship with them too. Just to finish really quickly then, we have got this website to draw your attention to, Keep Your Head website. It has a lot of resources on it for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough children and young people and adults around them. So it's definitely worth a visit. Keep Your Head. Pop that into Google search, you should be able to find it. So go and have a look at that. And finally, thank you very much for sticking with me for just over the hour now. If you would like to leave us any feedback, please do. I am going to pop in the chat a quick link to it. If you can't scan the QR code and you would just like to click on that link that I've just put in the chat, if you click on that, it will take you to another web page that you can then just sit and fill out at your leisure. It doesn't have to be while you're on the webinar at all, but we'd love to hear any feedback about what you'd like more of, less of, what you thought of today's training, and anything else that we can do to help you. If you'd like to get in touch with the YMCA Trinity Group, there's some details for you. Other than that, check out your inboxes over the next 10 or so days because these slides will land in there. And remember, there's that co-regulation video to watch when you get a chance. Thank you very much, guys. I don't think I have anything in the questions. I will just double check. There's nothing in the Q&A box. So I appreciate your time this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.